You know, for me to remember the years, I can just say it was in the 50s. I started out, what was his name, the organist. Bill Doggett, I was playing at the Cotton Club in downtown, West End, Cincinnati, with the Hampton brothers out of Indianapolis.
And you're playing bass?
Bass.
Okay.
And Bill Doggett came in one Sunday night as a featured attraction. So he liked the band. So he asked us would we like to do a Christmas album with him, and so we went over to King Records, and that's the first time I'd ever been there.
So you went there with your band down there from the Cotton Club?
Right.
Okay. And Bill didn't have a band at the time?
Well, he had a band, but he wanted to augment his band for this Christmas album. So he used a bass player, me, the trombone player, Slide, and trumpet player, Maceo, tenor player. I said it was a nice place. The studio was really modern. It wasn't cramped. The equipment was fine, first class.
And did you, on that first session, do you remember who produced it?
That was Henry Glover. Okay. Yeah, Henry Glover was there. He was the A&R man there, so.
Do you remember the engineer by any chance?
Eddie Smith, Edward Smith. Yeah.
Did you call him Smitty, or was it just Ed?
Just Ed, usually.
Okay. Yeah. On that session, as a bass player and first time being there, did you think that you might be doing this for a long time at King Records?
Not really. I just thought it was a one-time only affair. But Henry Glover, questioned me and asked me, was I living in town and all that? And he said, how would you like to come over and help us out on some of the...
So Bill Doggett came down to the Cotton Club, saw you there,
right,
pulled you guys into King. Then you met Henry Glover. Henry would call you for gigs. Like, what kind of gigs would Henry call you for?
Anything from dubbing in bass lines that weren't too distinct to just being part of a session with, some of the local talent.
Country, R&B, gospel?
Just about all of them. Bonnie Lou and all the rest of them, right?
What kind of bass did you play? Was it upright?
It was an upright, yeah.
Okay. Was it mic'd up right there?
Right. They'd put a little, stand to isolate you and put a microphone in front. I'd stand up there and earphones to listen. And
was the entire band in the same room?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody played together,
right,
record together. You had battles between instruments.
Right.
And the singer or the lead was probably right in the middle.
Right.
The
right.
So, what did you think about Bill Doggett?
Very nice person. Very nice person. He knew what he wanted, and he liked what he heard from the musicians that he had. He had his own band, so he wanted to augment it. So he knew what he wanted. He was a pro.
So you were basically a session player at King? And
that was about it.
Did you ever work with Little Willie John by any chance?
Yes, I was on the record Fever, and several other people. One that stands out was the doing the twist. The
Hank Ballard did?
Hank, yeah. Hank Ballard and the Midnighters.
Describe what happened with the twist.
Well, didn't realize it at the time. It was just a session, and that was just one of the tunes on that we cut on that session. But as it turned out, it became the lifeline for one of the great entertainers. He's still doing it.
As far as Little Willie John is concerned, did you? What was your impression of him?
Frankly, I just said it was a case of a very young person. I think he was about 17 at the time. And he was anything but normal. He was very profane and everything else, very spoiled. But that's the way it is. That's the way it was.
Did you on that Fever session? Did he seem like he knew what he was doing, or was the song already arranged?
It was more or less arranged, and it wasn't very hard to pick it up as far as progressions and things. But yeah, Willie John, he knew what he was doing. Yeah, and he was kind of cocky and arrogant, but he goes with the territory especially when you're 17. I don't remember doing that. I remember Bonnie Lou.
Okay.
I was on a couple of things with her, and what was the other lady that was over at WLW? Can't even think of her name now.
Did you ever go over to the Crosley building and record anything play on the radio? On the radio sessions?
I was on the Gwen Conley show.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the band.
Was that a relation to you?
No, just someone with the same last name, spelled the same way, Conley. But
what was your impression of Sid Nathan? And did you ever deal with Sid very much?
Not a lot, but he was very, bombastic type of personality, demanding, and whether he really knew what he wanted or not, he was in charge, and he let you know that, But he had some cooler heads around him, and they could kind of quiet him down a little bit.
So would you consider Henry Glover a cooler head?
Oh, very much so. And Henry operated from a standpoint of knowing what he wanted and what it was to have the musicians do, and because he could explain it. He was a musician. He was an arranger.
Yeah, he was a writer too.
Yeah, a good writer. Yeah.
Did you ever work with Ralph Bass on anything?
Yes, I ran into him, quite a bit because he was usually there.
What kind of fellow was Ralph?
He was kind of quiet. In contrast to Sid Nathan, he was very quiet. He knew what he wanted. And
did you ever see the record process where they, how they made the records?
Well, only from standpoint, I'd go into the control room sometimes with Eddie Smith, and see what they were doing, with the master tapes and things. But I never followed it through all the way, to where watch the processing take place with the record stamping and all that. Mm-hmm.
Now, did you get a lot of live gigs out of your affiliation with King?
Not really. No.
You were pretty well already established.
Nah, well, if you want to call it that, Cincinnati. Cincinnati is not New York. That's
well,
for
besides
sure.
Cotton Club, where else did you play?
Well, Living Room, you can name the Playboy Club and all the rest of them. But, those were just they happened, and usually they didn't last that long. A few months. And it's been interesting, but not necessarily regular as far as working. Mm-hmm.
When you guys recorded over there, was there any kind of a fun place to eat around there?
No.
No food?
No food. Mm-hmm.
Did you ever go to the Mance Hotel?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Could you describe what that was like, or exactly what that was?
Well, it was probably the biggest all-black hotel in the city at that time. And it sort of represented a milestone because it did have a place to eat, a ballroom. So it was pretty nice. Yeah.
And did a lot of King artists stay there, hang out there? Or?
Yes, at the time, because if the artists were black, then they more or less, that represented a good place to stay.
Did you ever have any good jam sessions over there?
Not really. When I played at Mance, it was usually for a particular affair, so I just happened to be part of the band.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I started out in junior high school at the Lincoln Grant School in Covington. Mm-hmm. And I was playing snare drum in the marching band, and the school board sent some instruments down to the school, and the bass was one of them. And my teacher said, well, you know how to read. And I had piano as a child. So he put me on the bass. Unfortunately, he wasn't a bass player. So
Did your folks ever see you play over at, or kind of witness some of your success at King?
Not really. Some of them, once in a while, some friends, I would, let them come along and witness what a recording session was like, and that would be about the extent of it.
Once the record was recorded at King, where was it played? Was it played very much in Cincinnati, or was it out?
I suppose it was. I can't say for sure, but King's had the whole thing there. And they not only recorded, they pressed the records. You could see they had a dock there where they sent the records out for distribution, and I suppose they had someone working on, pushing the record,
Do you remember what song it was of yours that you played on, that you first heard on the radio?
Probably Honky Tonk 2, and that was Bill Doggett,
Yeah.
There wasn't one. Honky Tonk 1 was made in New York. Honky Tonk 2 was made in Cincinnati.
That song seemed like that was a big tune for Bill. It seemed like that.
It really was, and
Yeah.
I think one of the tunes that made him, Well, I just feel it was a nice thing to have happened to me. Things weren't that good, as far as jobs in Cincinnati.
All right.
There wasn't that much offered, and you were lucky if you were working, and so I considered it a good chance, if nothing else, a good chance to make some extra money. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to put our names or have our names on the records, so we were just session players, and that's it.
So you were never credited as a writer?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
no.
So basically you were hired to play and also to come up with maybe your own lines or whatever? I mean,
Well,
bass
right,
lines, whatever.
if Henry Glover thought you could help the line or something, good, but not enough to get your name on that record, because that was a big no-no.
Do you feel kind of angry about that, or?
No, I think that's just the way it
Just the
was.
way it is?
Yeah.
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 It seemed like there is in the music business is not always up and up, and it seemed like a lot of the guys who were the session players oftentimes were just that. They got
Right.
paid and you're out of here. So
That's it.
But in terms of places to play, you're saying Cincinnati was pretty well limited. Did you have to go out like Chicago or somewhere else to play, or?
Well, it really, Cincinnati was, it had its own, feeling.
Yeah.
And it was kind of limited. For the size of the city, I considered Dayton a better place for jazz musicians to be. And Dayton's a smaller city, but it just had a better outlook as far as jazz. And it just seemed that way. Now, whether it was that way or not, I don't know. When I got out of service, and I was fortunate in since I got out, I went in at 17 and got out at 19. So then that's when I got serious about learning my bass. So I ran into another bass player in Cincinnati at a jam session in the West End at a place called the Play Bowl. And he told me about a good teacher, one of the performers with the Cincinnati Symphony, and gave me his number and name, and I called him, and he would come every Friday from Mount Healthy to Covington, Kentucky. 21st and Center in Covington, Kentucky, where I live, and teach me for an hour, and then he'd go on. He'd have his performing frock on, and he'd go to the music hall for the Friday afternoon concert. And that went on for about 3.5, 4 years.
The fellows you played with at King Records, were you the same rhythm section basically, or did it probably changed with you since you came in to put in a part or whatever?
Yeah.
But did you play with a regular set of guys over there?
Well, Phil was on a lot of the same records. Our discographies are similar, except his is about twice as thick as mine. But he was on a lot more than I was. But I did pretty well.
Did you ever estimate how many songs you played on the King?
Not really, but I do have a copy of the discography, and
Right.
it's interesting. A lot
Did
of things
you,
I didn't realize I was on, you know.
Oh, yeah. But, now, were you a full-time musician at that time, or did you have another job somewhere?
Well, when I first started, I was all music. And later on, I was working at the post office, at Cincinnati Post Office, and still managed to, you know, Henry would call me and call my wife, or, you know, and my wife would call me, and I'd go over and make a session. Mm-hmm.
So were you married pretty young?
No, I married when I was about 26, 27.
So you married when you had some cash and you were a professional.
I didn't really
famous.
have that much, no.
So she married you for your money? Or did she-
No, no. But they turned out all right. I was married 53 years, and she passed last year. Mm-hmm.
So you worked at the post office probably most of that time?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I worked until '89, and retired. Mm-hmm.
So that gave you a nice little
It gave me a
foundation, so you
right.
can play whatever you want to play
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. That's great.
Yeah, it never did, prevent me from playing. It didn't necessarily help me, but I managed to work some of the shifts at daytime, and they could, get out and play at night. It wasn't that much demand, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
That's the reason why I was working down there.
Well, I'll ask you a couple more questions and we'll wrap this up. I
Mhm.
know you've been here a long time today, but of all the songs you played on and all the musicians you played with, could you maybe limit or pinpoint maybe a couple of the most incredible experiences you ever had there at King?
Well, there was an album by a fellow named, I think his name was either Kirby or Henry Puckett, and he was out of Arkansas, same state that Henry Glover is from, and he was a pianist. Anyhow, that was the most interesting because he was really a tremendous pianist. Now, you probably never heard of him.
Was he jazz?
Yeah, he was jazz,
Yeah.
yeah. That was demanding, yeah.